Dolphin fan. Let's go! What is good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason, and we are back here for another one. I hope everyone is having a fantastic start to your week on this Monday, May 8th. Tonight, we are joined by the homie from the 33rd team and SI.com, as well as he does stuff for Dolphins Talk as well. One of the day ones on this channel. Hey, Dante, what's going on, bro? We've come a long way.
We have, man. Not much. Happy to be back. Happy to talk draft. This is year two. I almost wanted to say year three. That doesn't feel quite right, but at least year two of me doing post draft stuff here, man. It feels good.
Yeah, I think this is year 3, bro.
Is it? Wow.
Yeah, it is. Because I started this channel March 2020. So yeah, this is year 3.
Wow.
So welcome. Bro, also just a quick reminder, guys, tomorrow I'll be live and I'll be doing my prospect profile of Cam Smith. Your boy chopped up 8 minutes of all 22 of Cam Smith, and we're gonna break him down a little bit. But before we get to Wednesday, let's deal with tonight. Ryan Roberts is going to join us tonight because we did it with him last year, but he had something personal come up, so we're wishing the best for Ryan right now. Knight donates $5 and he says, say we don't bet Hill, how many yards does a Waddle and a Cedric produce in your opinion? 1,500 for Waddle, 1,200 for Cedric, 750 for Sherfield is my best. Oh, if we didn't have Hill last year. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Nah. Well, if you actually do the numbers, if I believe someone did the numbers. I saw it on Twitter. If Tua would have been healthy for all 17 games, Waddle would have finished with about 1,550 yards, somewhere around that. So, yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's get into this, though, bro. Oh, hold on. $5 donation from WMC. How pumped are you for training camp one-on-ones? Ramsey, Cam Smith, and Howard versus Tyreek, Waddle, and this guy threw Chosen Anderson in there instead of Braxton Berrios. Love it. Let's start off with you, bro. Okay, because we haven't had you on the channel since the Ramsey edition and all that kind of stuff. How excited are you that Jalen Ramsey is now a Dolphin and part of this defense, as well as the Vic Fangio edition?
Oh man, I'm jacked up. And as a fellow all 22 guy, getting somebody like Fangio is just, I mean, so exciting, right? Because the film is going to be really interesting to watch. It's going to be really challenging to watch, just because of how much stuff the defense is going to do. And then you get a player like Jalen Ramsey who can play 3 spots for you, depending on how you define those roles. He can play any safety spot that you could possibly ask for. He can play outside corner. We're going to talk about Cam Smith. I think that pick allows him to play in the slot a little bit more, which is very exciting. So I'm really pumped. And to answer the question there, like one-on-one, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a ton of fun. One-on-ones are really just for fun. They're not really for anything else. It's for viral moments and people having a good time with football kind of ramping up. So I'm incredibly excited. Obviously, like, Fangio is about as slam dunk as you can get at DC, and they got Jalen Ramsey for what I would consider to be nothing. So yeah, I think it's about as good a trade as you could ask for, and you just have to hope that he hasn't approached that cornerback drop-off point this offseason, and it comes abruptly. I don't think it's going to happen, but 5% chance it does. So I think that's probably the only downside that you could possibly, kind of grab onto here.
What are your thoughts on all the Dalvin Cook rumors that continue to persist?
I would be shocked if they trade for Dalvin Cook. I really would be. I just don't think that One, I don't think they need him, but I'm also like notoriously anti-running back. So I don't know if my opinion there is going to hold a ton of weight. But I think you draft a player like Devon Achane in the 3rd round. I think you bring back Raheem Mostert, you bring back Jeff Wilson, they bring back Salvin Ahmed, Myles Gaskin. I personally don't think they go after Dalvin Cook. I don't think there's a reason to, quite frankly, and I don't know. I don't know how you get all these players touches at the end of the day as well, which is something that worries me because the Dolphins don't really run the ball that much as is. And so if you bring in a player like Dalvin Cook, there's going to be a pressure to get that player touches. And frankly, I don't know that he's that much better than what the Dolphins already have. And that's going to be a take I'm sure I'll get crapped on for. But I really believe in running backs not mattering. And so I'm going to stick by that. But it would surprise me. I don't think that Chris Grier values that position. And he already drafted a running back that Mike McDaniel wanted in the 3rd round. I'm sure Chris Grier was grinding his teeth sending that card in for Devon Achane, given that he's 5'8", 1 whatever. Not a player Chris Grier would draft, but absolutely a player that Mike McDaniel would draft. So I'd be surprised if they had another running back personally.
What were your thoughts before we get into like the Dolphins specifically? Like what were some of the biggest surprises for you on, throughout the draft? Obviously, man, those Darnell Washington medicals must have been a sight to behold, huh? Because we know like there was a lot of similarities in terms of what NFL scouting circles felt about Darnell Washington, as even like draft Twitter did. Like there was a lot of similarities because everyone saw the ceiling, but those medicals just clearly crushed him, and I've tried to tell people, when you're that size and you're that kind of a lumbering runner and you got knee and ankle medicals here, like, that's going to give teams for pause. But that was probably one of my biggest surprises. Levis didn't really shock me because you knew if you got outside the top 10, there weren't a lot of teams that were going to be drafting for quarterback there, right? Like, as much as people don't want to hear it, the league is, we're full of a lot of good quarterbacks right now in this league right now. So, what were your biggest surprises of the night, and what were some of the things that kind of threw you back?
Yeah, I mean, a couple. I think the Washington one surprised me. It was very weird when I did a best player available for Miami on day 2. I sent a tweet out and I linked my big board, the only big board that I did this year, and I didn't mention Washington because I had him so high that I just scrolled past him when I was making the tweet. And I didn't realize, like, I just didn't like conceptualize the fact that he was still on the board. So that was a big surprise. But yeah, like you said, the medical is probably not great there. So, sometimes you just have to admit that you don't have all the information, when exactly. So many teams pass on a player that many times, right? Like a lot of people were very upset that the Dolphins didn't take a tight end, and we'll get into this. And I'm not, given the way that the board fell, exactly. And knowing what we know now about Darnell Washington and why he fell. So again, like I was beating the Darnell Washington train the entire draft process. He was the first player that I wrote a Dolphin specific scouting report for in like February or January, maybe like late January. So, I wanted him on Miami, but at the end of the day, you just kind of have to accept the fact that the medicals weren't there. The big surprises too were the Lions picks in the 1st round, and it really sucked. And because
did you hear they said they would have taken Gibbs if Bijan was on the board?
I don't believe them. I don't believe it. No. I'm not buying that.
What conviction?
I don't believe them at all. Now, everyone always would have taken the player that they drafted higher than the player that they didn't get.
You know what someone said to me, bro? Like, what in the last couple of years, these guys must have been listening. Look at how many of my guys they've taken. Panay, Laporta. You look at all the guys they've taken, and there's a couple more. These guys have taken so many guys that I want. It's unbelievable. Anyways, go ahead. The surprise about the Lions.
I'm kind of glad you mentioned that, because that kind of goes to my larger point of like the Lions draft really makes me upset, because I look at it and I'm like, oh, I really like all these players, and then it's like, oh, I really hate where they drafted them. Yeah. And it's like, but
then if you start flipping guys around,
right?
It like works out, bro.
Yeah. It's like, okay, well, if they traded back and took Brian Branch at 12, they took Jahmyr Gibbs at like 18.
Yeah. You live with it.
Jack Campbell to that 2nd round pick. They keep Laporta, and it's like, okay,
Bro, when they took Campbell and then Laporta, you ever seen that Simpsons where Bart literally freeze frames Ralph's heart breaking. That was me, bro. Like you could literally see the moment my heart broke in half. I mean, bro, they had a good draft. I agree with you. I did just the placement of it, but bro, those Eagles, my friend.
Oof.
Oh,
Oof. I live right outside of Philadelphia, and I the amount of texts that I got from like all my friends from high school and college just celebrating, and I'm just sitting there like, yeah, dude, like yeah, like you guys killed it, you know. It's crazy. Nolan Smith falling to 30 was really surprising. I thought he would go higher than that. I just think he's such a damn good football player. I don't know that he ever becomes like a dominant pass rusher, but I just think he's such a good football player. And then Jalen Carter, I mean, his film's crazy. So if they figure it out with him on the even if he's like 85% of the player that he was in college, I mean, that's worth the 9th overall pick to me. They steal Keely Ringo. I liked Sidney Brown in a bad safety class. I don't even like, I had like a solid grade on Tyler Steen. Like, I don't even hate that pick. Just a damn good football team. And then they add DeAndre Swift for nothing, basically. Yeah, wildly impressive. That the Eagles are crazy. We have a lot of connections to that front office over the 33rd team. And, you know, I get to hear a lot of really good Howie Roseman stories. I mean, guy just, he gets it. He makes mistakes. He's made a lot of them, but he just consistently, he makes a ton of mistakes. He drafts Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. They trade up for Carson Wentz, but like, dude just keeps going to bat, you know, like he doesn't let it affect his confidence. I think that's why he's been so successful. And the Eagles are primed for another Super Bowl run. They're going to be right there in the NFC again.
Didn't they get Eli Ricks too?
Maybe as a UDFA.
I think they got him out as a UDFA because the new Eagle, you know the Eagles logo, like with the one that is actually spells the Eagles.
Yeah,
people redid it, and the A was the Alabama logo, and the G was the Georgia logo.
I mean, yeah, I mean, why not draft all the good players?
Healy's going to be a steal. Teams? I don't know where the draft process went so wrong on him, but that guy's going to be a steal, man.
He's tough because his film's a little bit rough sometimes because you see the lack of transitional quickness. You see the like, can this dude catch question marks? And it's like, maybe not, but like long, fast man, you know, like I just at corner, like that's a position where like tools mean more to me. And he has every tool that you could that's possibly ask for. So
yeah, we'll see how that one turns out. What were your thoughts on Anthony Richardson to the Colts?
Beautiful. I love it. I think it's great. If I could have handpicked a landing spot for him, it would have been that. I just think you get a guy like Shane Steichen who knows how to use that type of passer. Colts have a pretty good infrastructure around them. You like some of the pieces they have on the O-line. They have Jonathan Taylor. I think they have a really interesting young receiver room. Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman. They add Josh Downs, I think is an awesome complementary player to what they already have. I think Jelani Woods, a budding star at tight end. I think he's going to be really good out of Virginia. I love that, man. I love that landing spot. I was a big Anthony. I honestly, like, I would have taken him at 1. That's where I got to. He was not my QB 1, but if I was a GM sitting on the board, I probably would have taken him at 1. I just don't know how you don't swing there. So, really, really happy for him with that landing spot. I think that's going to be awesome for him.
I keep hearing how genius levels is what I keep hearing with Bryce Young. Like, in terms of processing and board work, right. I heard he's a fucking genius, bro.
I believe it. I just think this was a great quarterback class. Like, I really do. I just think you have 3, like...
You just got major flaws. Each one has a major flaw, right? Like,
for sure.
But that's the thing.
But at the end of the day, like, I mean, you can poke a major flaw in any quarterback prospect ever, right? Like, Trevor Lawrence was hella arrogant when he came out, right?
Well,
and that was his major flaw, you know?
I could say Joe Burrow and Tua were cleaner tape-wise than these guys.
To a certain degree, yeah. But I think from an upside perspective, I mean, definitely cleaner than Richardson. Richardson's film is not clean.
Like Bryce, the problem with Bryce was you look at him and you go that you cringe at the size. With Tua, you'd be like, okay, he got the size that, sure, I'm not a fan of it, but I'm a way more of a fan of that size than I am of right, and similar athletes to an extent in terms of extending and stuff. Like, not that massive. I think Bryce is gonna. I'm gonna be because if Bryce was 6'1", bro, holy.
Well, it changes the conversation. For me, it's not even the height; it's the weight that worries me. I like the height, like not great, obviously, but it's like he is like thinner than thin. Like even short guys, like even Tua's got a little bulk to him. Baker's got a little bulk to him. Kyler's got bulk to him. Same with Russell. Like, dude, Bryce is thin. That's where it's the weight less than the height, at least for me. And I feel that way about a lot of players. I feel that way about Devon Achane too. It's not really the height, it's the weight that concerns
Yeah, but
me.
you watch the film and you watch it. He doesn't play at 188, and then when you
I agree. That was one of my main takeaways. I agree with you.
When you take into account that he's a track star, so he cuts weight. He doesn't have. See, what this is my biggest issue with people that keep sticking, and I'm not saying you. I could see these people keep weight. Well, here he doesn't have a football body. He has a track body. He cuts because he ran track at Texas A&M, so he would cut after football. He hasn't. When that guy's gonna play at like 198, 200, easy. People forget Moser was 190 when he came in. Now he's 200, and he didn't lose any explosion, right? What was Warwick done? Almost the exact same measurables, bro. And they play a very, very similar game in terms of pinballing. They'll bounce right off you. They can either elude you or they can shed you. I'm not saying he's Warwick done, but they play a very similar style. Very, very similar style.
Yeah. No, I was impressed with the way Achane took on contact for a guy of his size. That made me feel a lot better.
Yeah, he plays like he's 200.
Yeah, he has to because he has to get closer to what our guy Gainwell looks like, right? Like body type wise, that's what he needs to look like on the field. So, his film made me feel a lot more confident in that because I'll be honest, I didn't get to him pre-draft. I only watched about 60 guys this year. And so the first time I watched him was after the Dolphins had selected him. And obviously I knew about him. I had seen him on, Saturdays and whatnot, but so I was happy with that because I was a little bit worried but no, he took on a big workload at the SEC. So it makes me confident that he can be an outlier that's successful. And, but again, going back to Young, it's the weight, man. He's so thin. Yeah. I don't think he's going to put on a lot of weight. I really don't.
What do you think he's going to max out at too?
I don't think he gets that high. I really don't. I don't think he plays at 200 pounds. I think he's going to play less than that.
See, but then the problem is, and this is what I keep telling people, but if you're going to play at that weight, you got to have Kyler Murray athleticism, bro. You got to have that elusiveness athleticism because, I always try to tell people this, right? Like, if you're like a really good athlete at the collegiate level, when you go to the NFL, you are now a good athlete. You are no longer a really good athlete amongst these guys. Like, listen, he was my edge 9, and they clearly went off the board. But if Will McDonald lines up Bryce Young, he's probably going to give Bryce Young, a trip to Tuesday. You know what I mean? And on a Sunday. You know what I mean? Talk about that, though. How shocked were you when that pick came through, bro? Talk about a pan. Didn't you feel like, oh, look, it's Chris Grier with Austin Jackson and the run on tackles?
Yeah, it was that was another shocker because ironically, I watched Will McDonald and he didn't crack my top 50, which is the only board that I released this year. So that'll tell you what I think of that pick. And it's not even that I think Will McDonald's a bad football player because he's not, but that high in the first round was definitely surprising. But I think you trust a guy like Robert Saleh to get the most out of a player like that in that scheme, right? Like that player in that scheme feels good. But man, he's got a lot of work to do. Not a very functional run defender, super light in the pants. But like you said, I mean, even a guy like that, I think if he tees up Young, it's just you worry. And that kind of goes back to my hey, I would have taken Richardson at 1 thing because it's as much as I had a higher film grade on Young and Stroud than I did on Richardson, right? I'm not trying to sit here and say that I had Richardson at QB1, but if I'm a GM, that for some reason, the jumping through the hey, I just need this guy to be a better completion percentage guy, that feels like an easier hoop to jump through almost than hey, I need Bryce Young to be an historical outlier. And I need CJ Stroud's ceiling to be a lot higher than I think it is. And I love Stroud. Stroud was QB1 for me. I think he had the best film in the class. But I don't know, man. Richardson's just, it's so hard not to watch his film and be like, man, I just need him to be 50% better. And he's going to be a top 5 quarterback for X amount of years.
But bro, I'm seeing people are Mike Vick comparisons already, and Vick was a better passer coming out of Virginia Tech than he is. I'm watching all this stuff. I'm like, y'all people need to relax right now. This guy's even taken a snap yet in the NFL,
Yeah.
And that's a ridiculous comparison because I look at, to me, Mike Vick's the best mobile quarterback who ever played the game. He's better than Lamar. Come on.
I think Richardson to Vick stylistically makes sense. It's so hard making comps for a player like that because there's like, what, 3 players all time that are even like in that bubble. Like, what are your comp options for Richardson? It's Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick, and like Randall Cunningham. Like,
yeah.
You know, like that, those are your comp options. So it's tough. I don't think Vick was, people underestimate Vick's like ball placement and accuracy and things like that, especially when he came back after in prison with the Eagles. Like that took a jump.
When Andy Reid made him a pocket quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah. Bro. Like he really took a jump there, but in the same vein, like that's the jump you're looking for with Anthony Richardson. I don't know if he ever becomes Mike Vick, but you're kind of looking for that same developmental jump.
Yeah, because I always say to myself, now listen, we're not going to get into the details as to why, but if that guy never went to jail, bro, you know what? You know the kind of special ball we missed in terms. No, obviously, rightfully so, right? But the type of ball that everyone was deprived of because of his stupid decisions. You know what I mean? He didn't just deprive himself of money. He deprived football fans of like probably watching a really. It would have been a Hall of Fame career, bro. But the guy was an idiot. So. Hey, did it to himself. You know what I mean? So let's get into this right now. So before we do, I got to pick your brain on this because this thing is really tapped my ass the wrong way. I see people who claim in our community who claim they are draft content creators. Okay. And they are feeding this narrative. And I got a real issue with this. BPA overreaching for need. These people are mad that the Miami, or they're disappointed because it's literally, I read a big thing. It's a great thing. It's a great little piece I wrote about how when people start doing like draft research, you know, just normal fans, and they start watching highlights on YouTube and they start reading up on players and their team's needs, you know, when players that they want or they think the team needs to be selected, endorphins go off, right? It's this whole endorphin feed. And that's why when they totally go off the board of something they don't expect. That's why you get such this negative reaction because you get the opposite chemical reaction basically. And it was crazy. It was very interesting. When I read it, I was like, holy crap, people are actually writing this stuff nowadays. Great stuff, bro. Draft content is now getting to endorphins. I love it. So it's awesome, bro. 2023. I never thought we'd be here. So my thing to you is, what were your feeling on that, bro? Because I know you watch Cam Smith. Cam Smith's a damn good player. On top of that, I know you're a smart football mind, and I know you understand the football, the business side of it in terms of where Needham's health may be at, what they're going to do with Trill in terms of maybe safety, where his health's at. X next year, if he's going to play ball financially, he might be gone. Noah is obviously a bust. He might be gone. You know, that room's going to look totally different, and they brought in a guy like that. So your whole thoughts on this, because I know you saw it, and you had to get frustrated, bro. All these people crying and whining that we didn't reach for a need when BPA was staring us in the face, because my thing, and I'm trying to convey them to Dante, when you reach for need over BPA, that's how you get busts. That's when you reach for needs is when you usually hit your bust. And you know this, okay? Because you're an evaluator, you do all that kind of stuff. And I know you know this. If we busted out on BPA, it would be a lot easier of a sell for all of us as a scouting department, general manager, and everything to that owner that, hey, that was our best player available. We didn't reach past him. He just didn't work out. Whereas if you go past your BPA and you reach for a guy who's 63rd on your board just because he's in need, and then he busts out, what's the owner going to say? Why didn't you take the top guy on your board, right? And that's what the scouting department's going to say. Why didn't we take the top guy on our board? So what are your whole thoughts on BPA versus reaching for need? Because I even saw people who claim they were draft content creators getting their panties in a fuss over this and clearly not understanding the nuances of how this process works, Dante.
Yeah, so I'll address this in 2 parts. I'll start generic, and then I'll kind of whittle it down to the Dolphins' approach with Cam Smith. I think, generically speaking, it is really easy for us to sit here and look at a roster and say, okay, well, they have a need here and they have the need there. And you have to understand, and this is something that I've become more privy to with my job with the 33rd team. I work with former NFL general managers, and our entire scouting department is made up of people who worked in NFL scouting departments for 20 years. And I work with those guys. I edit their content. I listen to them talk ball. I listen to them talk process. I cannot describe to you how different the process is for them versus what we do here in the media for scouting players. They don't see it the same way. And so when you talk about BPA for the NFL is incredibly important. It's all they care about. It's not even like a conversation. Like they do not have conversations of BPA versus need in NFL draft rooms. They don't.
They shouldn't.
And so what ends up happening is, now obviously there are caveats to that, right? Like the Dolphins are not going to take a quarterback if they fall to 52, right? Like let's say, I don't know, Anthony Richardson had the Laramie Tunsil thing happen, right? And he's on the board at 52, right? Like there are caveats to that. This is not a one size fits all conversation, but NFL teams, they stack their board and then the draft happens. And when they're on the clock, they look at their board and they have a player at the top. They send the card in and that's it. And they have all those conversations before the draft. Another huge misconception is like, oh, teams argue on draft night. They do not. They have everything is figured out before draft night. Rick Spielman wrote a piece for our site and he said, our draft room was as quiet as a church on draft night until we made our pick and everybody clapped. He said that was the first thing that everyone said.
And they have horizontal boards. They don't have just vertical boards, right?
So what ends up happening is when need comes into play here, right, for NFL teams, is they get on the clock and they'll have multiple players ranked on the horizontal board in the same spot. And then they have the need. Then it's the need conversation. So then it's, hey, we have an offensive tackle and a quarterback with the same ranking, but we have a needed offensive tackle. We don't have a needed corner. Okay, now we're going to address that need. And so what ends up happening is it ends up being BPA at a position of need. That's what it ends up being. It's not one or the other. It's a combination of the two. And so as I whittle this down to talk about not the Jets, I was reading the comment there. The Dolphins process with Cam Smith at 52. It's everything that I just said. However, and I was out ahead of this, and this is me patting myself on the back because I went on Drive Time with Travis Wingfield before the draft, and I said I think they'll draft a cornerback at 51. I was on Dolphins Talk, and I said if they don't draft a tight end, I think it'll be corner at 51. Corner was absolutely a position of need for this football team, and so when that pick happened, and everybody was like, I cannot believe that they didn't take a position of need, I was sitting there and I was like, I think they did. Now, was corner the number one need? Was it the most glaring hole on this roster? No. I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that this team doesn't need a right tackle more than it needs a corner. But at the same time, I look at this team and I see Xavier Howard, for whatever reason, injuries, money, he had a bad year, whatever it was. Dude wasn't good last year. It doesn't matter. We could spend a whole, podcast talking about why Xavier Howard struggled last year. Some things were his fault. Some things weren't. It doesn't matter. He's at the age of 30. He has an injury history. He wasn't good last year. Okay, cool. You traded for Jalen Ramsey, who's a good football player, but he's in the twilight of his career at the end of the day, right? Like I'm not trying to say Jalen Ramsey's bad or he's going to be bad this year. I'm saying like older corner playing on his third team. Cool. This fan base has chronically overrated Nick Needham. Good football player. He should be your fourth corner. I'm sorry. And he's also coming off a major season-ending injury. They're doing the same thing with Kader Kohu. Good football player. Should be your fourth corner. And so when I look at this team, I see a current need for another good corner, and I see a future need for a good corner. And when you're at pick 51, where the Dolphins were, you don't have like the luxury of being picky either. Yeah. Like you're outside the top 50. If good football player falls to you, you take him. And so that's where I kind of sat here. So for me, it was very weird seeing the backlash from the fan base. And I think it just came from we had been preaching tight end so much in the media, and we had been preaching right tackle so much in the media. Yeah. That I think fans just got attached to that idea, and we didn't know about the the Darnell Washington medicals. We didn't realize how far he was going to fall. There was a run on tight ends before the Dolphins picked, right? Laporta came off the board at 34. Mayer came off at 35. Kincaid, the Bills traded up for him at 25. So that started the tight end run a little bit early and blah, blah, blah. So again, like for me, like corner was like maybe the third biggest need on the team going into the draft. So when they took Cam Smith, like I just kind of shrugged. I was like, yeah, good player, position of need, send it in. Like I'm happy about it. So it's a really interesting conversation. I think what fans need to realize is that the way that we scout in the media is just so vastly different than the way that NFL teams do it. And I think people need to realize that the draft is just as much about filling future needs as it is about doing current ones. And when you look at this cornerback room, I see a huge need in hell, maybe next year at corner. And so that to me is, I think taking Cam Smith at 51 is great process. Great process. Everything about it is great process. Even if he's bad, I'm still going to defend
it. I don't think he is. I think he's a damn good player.
I don't think he's going to be bad either. So this one made a ton of sense to me. I was pretty surprised to see the pushback, but I think it had a lot to do with us in the media, just kind of constantly pushing tight end and right tackle, which we weren't wrong for doing. But
but you know what I kept warning people about 51? The sense that I got and the name that I kept saying, and when he came off the board, I thought we were toast on O-line at 51, was Matt Bergeron. I had heard through the whole process we loved that kid. And he went in the 40s, right? He went like 44 or something like that.
Yeah, the Falcons.
Yeah. When he went out the board, I'm like, and Avila was gone. I'm like, they're not going to take offensive line. There's no one worth all the stuff that I know privately about DeJuan Jones. People are looking at him as maybe the next Mekhi Becton, but at least Mekhi Becton might love football. So I said, McDaniel's going to stay away from that unless you get him as a steal in the 4th or 5th, and we don't have a 4th or 5th round pick, right? So, and I will say this. Now, we weren't on top of it like you were, but me and Neil, remember about 2 months ago when the word started leaking out that Keeley was going to be dropping out of the first round?
Yeah.
We started hypothetically saying, well, maybe they take a guy like Keeley at 51 because of the needs we have coming, because of the needs we have coming up. Like, it makes sense. If you actually that's why after it happened, I tweeted out, you can't drag them for drafting for now in the future. And another thing is, Kader Kohu, he agented up. He got David Canner. He got X's agent, right? You don't know what the kind of money that guy's going to be asking for too. So you really don't know how this is all going to be playing out. If he has another good season and everyone keeps hyping him up, you don't know what he's going to ask for, right? And so I don't know, man. I think it's smart. But what do you think about the player himself, though? Where did you have? Did he hit your top 50?
Yeah, so he was my 39th overall player. So you get my 39th overall player at 52. Like I'm happy. That's great. This is good value. Like I really like what Cam Smith brings to the table. I just I think he's going to be a really solid cornerback too for a long time. Like I just do. I don't know that he's ever going to be Xavier Howard or Jalen Ramsey. But I just think he's going to be a good, solid starting corner. He's got the right mentality.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
boy.
Yeah, like he's super physical. And like, is he a little bit light? Would I like to see him put on some weight? Is he a little bit over aggressive sometimes? Like, yes. And the reason I mention that is because when I'm projecting corner, I want a dude with some dog in him.
He's got that dog, bro.
Yeah, and he's got that dog in him. Like, I don't mind having a passive quarterback. Like, that doesn't bother me as much. Like, personality-wise, right? Like, Justin Herbert, quieter guy. Tua, quieter guy. Like, that stuff doesn't bother me. I'm not big on that rah-rah crap for every position. But, like, that rah-rah crap for corner, nah, dude. Like, I want my corner to be a rah-rah guy. I want him screaming, yelling, pointing in dudes' faces. I want, all that, coming up, hitting people in the run game that you're 20 pounds lighter than. Like, I want all that stuff in my corner. And so Cam Smith, incredibly fun watch. And I think, projecting him to a Vic Fangio scheme, versatile player, right? And that's what you look for in Fangio corners. You want guys who can play in zone primarily, but also have the ability to play man. I think Cam Smith gives you that. And what I'm really excited about in year one is, like, I think he could be the best slot corner on the damn team. You know what I mean? Like, I would put him in over Kader Kohu and Nick Needham right now. And I think what he allows you to do is something that I alluded to earlier, is he allows you to play Jalen Ramsey in the slot. He had best season of his career, arguably, in the slot for the Rams when they had Brandon Staley, who runs the Vic Fangio stuff. And so Smith, to me, just gives the Dolphins so many options. They have so many options. Javon Holland can play the slot. Certain matchups, you can put Brandon Jones in the slot against certain players. You want him to just go out and bully a big tight end, right? Like Brandon Jones can do that for you. And so it allows you to have movable pieces everywhere. And that's what I really like about the Cam Smith pick. So really, really solid football player. I think there's flaws in his game. Is he going to get burned by a double move every so often? Yeah, probably, because he's going to try and go for the interception and he's going to get pumped and beaten. But I would prefer that to a lot of the other weaknesses that some of these other cornerbacks have. So
I just love the physical part of his game, Dante.
Yeah, he's like a dog.
Like seeing him come up on screens in the run game and just shutting it down. Like
you watch the Kentucky game. You see him tackle Chris Rodriguez.
Oh,
in the open field.
Oh my God,
that was the selling point for me, because I was kind of like, all right, like he's a little bit thin and he's a dog. And then I saw him tackle Chris Rodriguez, who was like 225 at the combine, so he outweighs Cam Smith by like 45 pounds, probably even more than that, because I don't think Cam Smith is playing at 180 or whatever he checked in at. And he wrapped him right to the ground. I was like, all right, yeah, we're cooking with grease here.
Bro, did you watch that Missouri game from 2021 where he had 10 tackles and the pick? And then this year against Tennessee, right? And I really
comes up, makes that play on the screen in the flat there in the red zone. Dude. That was nice.
Bro, I don't know, man. I think last time Chris Grier drafted a stud in the second round, we know how that worked out, bro. And all I know is I love saying that we got a Gamecock ball hawk, baby. That's all I know. Hey? So, man, I can't. Well, I had fun. I had fun chopping his film up, man. And I'd already watched him pre-draft, but I dove into him even deeper after we drafted him, obviously. And bro, he's a fun watch, dude. Like,
I agree.
He was my fifth. He's my fifth corner. And
I think he was CB6 for me. I think he just missed it, but just a great corner.
Keeley was 6 for me. Keeley was 6 for me.
Yeah.
And then the first 4 were all the guys I had. Christian Gonzalez at 1, Witherspoon at 2.
Dude, him going to the Patriots made me sick. I was sick about that. I don't want to talk about it. I was sick about it, but we can move on there.
Let's talk about my guy, a guy who I've been banging the table for like 9-10 months before we drafted him, Devon Achane. Once I saw him, because, well, actually longer than that, over a year, because when I really fell in love with him was when I did my running back big board in 2021 of Isaiah Spiller. And I would get the Devon Achane mixed in there, right? And you would look at this kid, and I was a Spiller fan, but, Devon Achane was my running back 3 in this class. I don't think he was that far off from Gibbs. And you look at this kid, bro. We talked about it. He's a firecracker, right? Like, he pinball off you, bounce off you. His contact balance for his size is elite. No one ain't gonna tell me no different than this guy. And his vision, right? People don't expect him to be as good of a runner between the tackles as he is, and then you put on the film, and you're like, oh shit, like this guy's good. He sees a crease, he hits it. And the home run speed on top of this, bro. Like, one thing I hated about a guy like Kalen Ballage, Dante, was he was an athlete trying to be a football player. I need football players that are athletes. And, Devon Achane, you look at track stars, okay, usually in this sport, right? They don't have the lateral ability and the elusiveness and the vision that usually they're just vertical straight line guys and just let him hit the hole and boom, they'll take up. But this guy, no. He's got some of the nicest feet in that class. Man, listen, I can't say enough things about Devon Achane, bro. Like, everyone knows I love him. What are your thoughts on that pick? Because I honestly I know a lot of people in this community thought about me when that pick came through, but I thought about you, Dante, and your hate for taking running backs that high. And then I said, I bet you this guy's going to watch this film. He's going to say, yeah, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? So what did you think of the Devon Achane pick?
Yeah, one of the reasons I love coming on the show is because you and I see the game very similarly. And so you can almost, if you go onto all Nation Dolphins right now and you look at my written scouting report of Devon Achane post-draft, you almost just read it like sentence for sentence as far as all the things that I saw. I think I literally have a sentence in there that is like, for a player of this archetype, I was shocked how well he moves laterally. Like, this is not just a straight line speed player. Which is what I think separates him from a player like Raheem Mostert. So I really liked Achane. I'm fine with a running back at 84. I am. It's fine. It's late enough that I can swallow that pill and be okay with it. So that part didn't bother me. I liked Achane's film. I would have had a 3rd round grade on him. That's where the Dolphins selected him. So I'm totally fine with the value there. I think my concern with value with that pick is like, how many touches is he getting per game this year? I think that's probably my only concern is like, I'm not a fan of drafting gadget players at 84. I'm not saying Devon Achane is a gadget player long-term, but like this year on this team, like, I don't know. I don't want to take away touches from Tyreek Hill. I don't really want to take away touches from Jalen Waddle. I don't know if the Dolphins are going to use him like a traditional running back. I still think that's going to be Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert's role, at least for this season, or at least at the start of the season. And so I worry about like touch distribution here with Achane. That's probably my only concern. But I think when you watch the film, I agree with you. I just think that his vision is so impressive from a player that honestly I was not expecting him to have good vision, right? Because the archetype that everyone pitches is, oh, he's the speed back, he's this track player. And usually when you see those players on film, they're guys who still need to learn how to pick their way through, the tackles. And I don't see that with Achane. I see a guy who, look, is his vision elite? Is he perfect? Like, no, but he's good, right? Like he's solid. There's a lot of really nice runs where he finds cutback lanes. And one of the things that I really appreciated about his film, and I appreciate this with all running backs across the board, I like guys who take what's there. They don't try to do too much. They don't try to, I'm going to run 5 yards in the backfield. And Achane does this every so often, maybe a little bit more than I'd like. But generally speaking, I appreciated the way that, okay, it's 3rd and 2. I'm going to put my head down and get 3 yards. And, it's 2nd and 6. This play isn't blocked the way that I want it to be blocked. Okay, I'm going to stick my body in between tackles. I'll pick up 2-3 yards here. I'm not going to have a negative play trying to do something I'm not supposed to do. And I really appreciate that about running backs. And so those two things, his vision, his willingness to take what was there. And then lastly, again, I don't think he's got it. I think he'll take bigger hits than he took in the SEC at the NFL level. But for his size, I really appreciated the way that he was both willing and able to take on contact. There's a play against LSU. I put this in my article and I posted it on Twitter where he ran through a couple tackles, picked up like 5 extra yards. And it's like, hey, it's pretty good for a guy who's probably play weight 175 in college, right before he bulks up. So I was really, really impressed with what I saw from Achane. I really like the pick at 84. It makes a ton of sense for the Dolphins on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think he's a gadget player. I worry that that's going to be his pigeonhole this year just because there's so many other guys, right? Like he's going to be competing for touches with like Braxton Berrios and like the tight ends, right? Like how does that touch distribution work? But I think long-term, I think you really, really have a solid running back option. I still think you need to pair him with somebody. I don't think he's a workhorse back. I don't want him getting 20 carries per game, but really, really solid player for sure.
Now, if you got to 200 in year 2, year 3, you'd probably be more comfortable with him becoming more of a workhorse, right?
A bit, yeah. I'm kind of out on the.
I mean, like an
18.
I mean, like a 16 to 20 carry guy. I don't mean like 30 carries here. You know what I mean?
I would say like 15 touches per game is probably where I'd go with it. 10 carries, maybe 5 receptions.
Try like Kamara him, so you're like Alvin Kamaraing him, basically.
Yeah, that's where I would go with that. I think that's the ideal mold because again, can he bulk up? Can he get up to the 200 weight? Yes, and like I'm not trying to say that he can't, but it's still hard for guys to stay healthy at that weight. One of the things the Eagles have done so well, they have 2 backs with that size profile of Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott. I think Achane's better than both of those players, and I loved Kenneth Gainwell, so that's a compliment. Yeah. But they've done a really nice job of kind of cycling in those guys and using them correctly and really maximizing their strengths without putting them in situations where they're going to get injured. And that's kind of how I view Achane. I think he's a little bit better. So I think he can take on a little bit bigger of that role. And that's a good comment right there on the screen. Something that I mentioned earlier, you watch him in the SEC and you just go, all right, like this dude did it at the SEC level. That's as close as I'm going to get to NFL film. So you feel comfortable about projecting him forward to a solid workload in the NFL. So really solid pick at 84. I just worry about how much are you using him this year? And is that worth the 84th pick this year? I don't know. We'll see. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I do, because I think he's probably better than Jeff Wilson. I just don't know that we'll see him that early. That's all.
So let's talk about the 6th round pick, Isaiah Higgins here. out of Stanford, because I've seen you obviously just did your deep dive on him. Now I've already started on him because I'm basically, I got my Cam Smith prospect profile coming tomorrow, but then I've already written up everything I need, and I know everything I need to know to talk about Devon Achane for 8 to 10 minutes while all 22 highlights play, right?
Yeah.
So I don't really need. So I'm already on Higgins. Before I want to hear your thoughts on this kid, because I said one thing, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. Listen, I know people were rolling their eyes when they're like, "Oh, here we go, another transition." But I actually like this transition much more than I like the Tanner Connor. Like, I think this might be an easier transition. Like, listen, was he blocking in line? No, but he was a damn willing and good blocker when tasked as a receiver. Like, he was willing. I'm not going to sit here and say he was elite, but, listen. You look at him, and it's a guy you look at, they're probably going to try and replace a Gesicki with. They're not going to ask this guy to be a stud in line, but he's willing, which is a much better start than it was with Gesicki. What are your thoughts on Higgins, the leading receiver from Stanford last year?
Yeah. I think it's important to set expectations for 6th-round picks. What is a win for a 6th-round pick? If dude makes the roster, that's a good pick.
Win. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's the expectation, right? Like, that is like this, like,
my expectation is he's going to push Tanner Connor for the third tight end.
I agree. I think that's where I'm at with it too. And I think with Higgins, really, really interesting profile, because when you watch the film, and I don't know how much you've watched of him yet.
Did I call him Isaiah? By the way, Elijah. I think I called
Elijah.
Him Elijah. Oh, I'm on it today.
All good. But what's really interesting about him is when you watch the film, you watch him in Stanford, it's a lot of manufactured touches.
Yeah.
It's a lot of jet sweeps. It's a lot of, dump offs in, out into the flat. It's a lot of tunnel screens. I mean, Stanford was just, I could sit here and talk about an hour about how much I hated Stanford's offense last year, but
terrible. They
did everything in their power just to get the man the ball, because he was the only guy who could consistently make plays outside of the tight end. And I don't want to butcher his last name because I forget off the top of my head, number 84. He'll be like a 2nd-round pick next year. Not the point. But Higgins is, a guy that they use as a wide receiver, and they just tried to get him the ball. They tried to funnel the ball his way because they were just so bad offensively, and he was the only guy who could really make a play outside of that one tight end, because Michael Wilson was hurt the entire year, so they couldn't rely on him. Higgins, for me, is tough because I watch the film and I say, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? I see what Mike McDaniel sat down. This is a Mike McDaniel pick, by the way. Chris Grier would never have drafted this guy. This is a Mike McDaniel pick. 110%. He lines up in the backfield. He lines up in the slot. You see him in an H-back role. He can line up outside. You like the speed, the fluidity with which he moves. I just think, look, he's a project. He's a 6th-round pick for a reason. Doesn't run a big route tree, so I have concerns there.
Yeah.
Played at 235 pounds. He needs to add, if he wants to play tight end, he needs to add 20 pounds, give or take a few. That's a lot.
Do you think that'll, because one of the most surprising, I got to ask you this. If he has that kind of weight, one of the most surprising things when I put on his film was how good he was after the catch.
Yeah, right. So do
you think that'll take that? I think 20 pounds will take that away, bro.
So that's the other half here, right? This is why positional transitions are really hard, right? Because you look at the guy and you say, okay, he's 6'3", 233. He's not explosive enough to play wide receiver, but he'd be a really good tight end with these numbers. And so you kind of have to hope that you put 15 pounds on him and he's still just as explosive. And that's another question that I have. I don't know if he will be, and that's the problem. So, because you can't play tight end at 230 pounds. But it's not like he's a high, we'd feel safer if he was a high level athlete and they were asking him to do that. He's not a high level, he's a good athlete. Yeah. But he's not a high level. No, he's not an
athlete.
Elite athlete.
You know what I mean?
He's not. And so, he would have tied for the fastest 40 time at the combine for tight ends
4.54
at 233 pounds. 4.54 would have tied with Will Mallory. And so you have to think that if he puts on 15 pounds, he's probably running somewhere closer to a 4.6, which is not a bad time. No. It's a fine time, but that's his biggest strength. So you're fine at your biggest strength is kind of like shoulder shrug for me. So I get it. And I don't want to make this negative because he's a 6th-round pick. So I don't really care. If I'm being honest, I said this last night when I was on the Dolphins Talk podcast. Like, if this dude doesn't make the roster, I'm just gonna shrug. Like, it's a 6th-round pick. You threw a dart at the board. You know, you're gonna try and get a guy in there who fits your offense. He has some likable traits. You're gonna try and develop him. Maybe he sits on the practice squad for a year and he makes the roster. You spend 2 years on the roster. You cut him. We never hear from him. For me, that's a win. Guy sticks around for 3 years, a 6th-round pick. Yeah. Like, that's a win. So that's where I'm at with Higgins. I think there's enough likable traits there to make him a good dart throw in the 6th round. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's just a lot of hoops to jump through for this guy to be anything more than a depth player, at least for me. I just think there's so much work that needs to be done on route running, on weight, finding his role. And then the other issue is, like, I know everybody's like, oh, he's going to be the Mike Gesicki role. Dude, Mike Gesicki's not on the damn football team anymore because he can't block. You got to teach, like, tight ends have to block. I don't care if you're a primary slot guy. You have to be a functional blocker to be a tight end in the NFL. And, like, Higgins has no foundation as a blocker, at least at what they're going to do at tight end. So a lot of hoops to jump through, but I'm fine with the pick. Like, I think it's a good pick in the 6th round. I think you take a dart throw on a guy like that. I'm fine with it, but a lot of hoops.
So what were your thoughts on the 7th round pick, Ryan Hayes?
Oh, man.
6'6", 298. He played tight end in high school, didn't he? And it shows he got pretty good feet. You know, I look at him, bro. I literally see Eichenberg's profile with better feet. Like, that's literally what I see when I look at him, bro. I'm not even lying to you. What are your and for that, I actually think you might give Eichenberg a run for his money at left guard. Robert Jones might just win that job outright.
Right.
What are your thoughts on? Okay, he's a little bit of a project too. I think they're going to kick him into guard. I don't think they're going to keep him out at left tackle. What are your thoughts on Hayes? Again, he's a guy where because of how bad the starter is, I would be competition for Liam Eichenberg. So I automatically think he might be competition because who else is really behind him right now? It's going to be Robert Jones, Robert Hayes, and Liam Eichenberg battling for left guard right now.
Yeah, something like that. I think
DJ Skyfe in there, who I actually like as a UDFA.
I watched Hayes yesterday. And I tweeted out, look, man, he's a 7th round pick. And you know what? He plays like a 7th round pick. And I don't really mean that as like a knock. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the reality of the situation. Like, there's a reason this guy was a 7th round selection. Like this is not a steal for me. It's just like, hey, the Dolphins drafted a 7th round player in the 7th round. Like, whatever you get out of him for me is icing. You know what I mean? Like, again, it's the same conversation with Higgins. If he makes the roster, for me, it's a win. If he sticks around the practice squad and he's a backup swing guard for 2 years, that's an absolute win for a 7th round pick. So my primary concern with Hayes is like power, like functional strength. Like, dude he's weak, man. Like, he is just not strong. And that worries me. I think he needs to put on weight. I think he needs to add functional strength.
He's not even 300 pounds, right? He's like 295.
Yeah, he was playing at he had to be playing at like 280 something last year, like high 280s. I don't even.
And when you're 6'6", that's like a slim.
Yeah, dude. Like, right? Zach Harrison, I mean, just pushed him into the backfield on like 60% of his snaps in that Michigan-Ohio State game. And like, I see the athleticism. I see the zone blocking. I see why the Dolphins would select him in the 7th round. Like, I get it from a scheme perspective. You're taking a flyer on that guy. Maybe he develops, but I just think, I don't know. I'm more optimistic about Higgins than I am about Hayes. I don't know. I don't see it with him. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. To your point, though, I mean, the offensive line is terrible at certain spots. So, you know what? Maybe he has a really good camp. He makes the roster and he makes an impact this year. I mean, God, I hope he does. So, but for me, it's power. That's an issue. It's defending his inside shoulder. He oversets a lot. Guys were killing him with spin moves, crossovers, hezzies. Like, he was just getting like beaten on those pretty bad. So I worry about that. And everybody's like, oh, he's going to play guard. And it's like, I mean, sure, but I don't really know how many problems that solves, right? Because on the interior,
you need that functional strength.
Yeah, like I'm almost more worried about your anchor on the interior than I am at tackle. You know what I mean? Like obviously you need a good anchor to play anywhere on the offensive line, but
But it's just because of what you. It's because of what you said. Like I noticed speed rushers getting inside on them like real quickly, and then power. Like you can't leave them out on an island either, right? So you're like you're just stuck in a place of, you damn if you do, damn if you don't. And I think as crazy as it sounds, the functional strength is the only glaring weakness when I look at him inside. When I look at him outside, I see way more issues with him too. I don't know, man. Like hopefully good coaching. I mean, we're gonna find out how good Butch Berry is of a coach, huh?
Yeah, I mean, look, the dude's a 7th round pick, right? Like I have no expectations for this player, none.
Yeah,
like exactly. If he does anything at all, I'll be happy about it. And I think that's the approach that fans should take. This is not, Anthony Munoz. You know what I mean? Like it's just it's not, and that's okay. Kid was a 7th round pick. Like give him a chance. Let's see what he does. There's a lot of holes in his game. I don't know how many guard fixes. We'll see though.
So what do you think is going to happen with it? How do you see this before? Well, actually, let's talk about the UDFAs and then I'll ask you that. Now, you haven't had a chance to dive into a lot of the UDFAs, but I know one name you've heard and a guy I'm pretty high on, Aubrey Miller, is out there. And you look at the depth we have at linebacker right now. Would it really be that hard for him to maybe squeak in there?
No, probably not.
Because he was a big special teams contributor. You know what I like? This is what stuck out to me, Dante. The resumes of the guys they brought in. Do you know what I mean? So like, you look at, you look at, for example, what's his face? Aubrey Miller, right? SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, right? You look at, what's his face? You look at Zeke Vandenberg, won the Buke Buchanan Award for the FCS Defensive Player of the Year. You look at Michael Turk, the Bloodline, right? You look at how do you say his name? Alama Ulave, the center they brought in from San Diego State. First team All Mountain West. You look at Garrett Nelson, a kid I actually kind of like. Second team All Big Ten, and he was top 10 in the Big Ten. He was number 9th in tackle for losses. Like, they're not bringing in jabronis off the street. Like, these guys have, like, legitimate resumes where if they made the practice squad and you could develop them for a year or two, you might have, like, really good depth players here if you don't even just get, like, I'm not banking on anyone being a starter out of the gate here, but one of these guys, like an Aubrey Miller, could push for that 53rd roster spot because of his ability to contribute on special teams as well, right? Like, and then that could lead into him being a key depth piece, because you look at his background and you look at a guy like Duke Riley.
Yeah, that was
who do you want to roll the dice on? Hey, who do you want to roll the dice on, right? So, like, what are your thoughts on? Because, we added 21 UDFAs, which is a freaking ton.
Yeah.
All right. Now, do you see one maybe cracking the roster, or do you see, do you see a bunch? Because another guy who I think's really slept on too, that kid out of the U, you probably haven't had a chance to watch him yet, DJ Skife. He plays guard and right tackle. He's actually decent. Like, I think he might have higher upside than Hayes, and I'm not even sitting here saying that this guy's going to start.
Look, the line between 7th round pick and UDFA
is not very deep, right?
Thin.
Because some players, I know some players and their agents say, don't even bother drafting. We want to get the guaranteed money. Like, don't even bother drafting us in the second.
Yep. No, and I will tell you, now having seen NFL boards and how they're structured with my own eyes, most 7th round players have UDFA film grades because teams don't have that many grades on players. And so they're on like a completely separate board in another part of the room. I think I would not have high expectations for this UDFA class making the roster, only because I think the roster is good. You know what I mean? Like, I just think the Dolphins have a really nice problem here of like, hey, we're going to bring in 21 guys because we have to fill a 90-man roster. And then we're going to whittle it down. I think Miller's got a chance to make it because of a lot of things you mentioned, special teams play. That's where he's going to make it. This is not a guy who's going to play linebacker on the field in year one, but he can be a special teamer, right? In special teams, you want athletes and dudes who hit. And you know what? Miller can do that as a UDFA. Sure. He was a Missouri guy too, right? A lot of people are like, he's Jackson State, 3 years at Missouri. He's an SEC level athlete.
Bolton beat him out. My boy Bolden beat him out.
So like, don't sleep on athleticism there. Turk, I'm not going to sit here and talk about, punters, kickers, whatever,
Yeah, but come on. A lot of people think that he should have been drafted, and Jake Bailey's been kind of bad.
I'm not saying he can't make the roster. I'm just saying I can't evaluate punters. I you know what I mean? No, like truly, like,
bro, just distance and hang time, bro.
Yeah, right. It's just like, how far did the ball go and how long was it up there? That's the only thing I can talk about with punters. So like, maybe Mike Turk's the best punter in the world. I'd have no idea. I'd have no clue. So he can make the roster, sure. And I think Miller's got a chance as a UDFA. I kind of like the USC nose tackle too. I'm slipping on his name a little bit. Yeah, I think he's got a shot.
They gave him $100,000.
Yeah, that's the main reason. 1, 2, like,
did you see how much Andre Carter got for the Vikings? They gave him $300,000.
I did see that, and Andre Carter was a first round pick in October. So,
dude, I can't believe he didn't get drafted, bro. I was shocked.
His film was bad.
Yeah, but
it
wasn't that bad year prior. Like,
no, probably not. But I think that there's a lot of
recency bias. Jeez.
Yeah, I think so. So. But with the Dolphins, like I think the kid from USC's got a shot just because like he could be the backup nose tackle if they value that on the 53-man roster, say over like an extra receiver or a 4th running back or a 8th offensive lineman.
Check out that Montalvo kid. I don't know if you saw it, but that guy has the 122nd best RAS of all defensive tackles.
Really?
Yeah, from UCF. Okay. Check him out. He's 120. Right. He's like 122 out of over 1,800 DTs razzed. Okay. Check him out, bro. When I saw that, I was like,
right.
"Oh, okay."
Yeah, I love my fat leads.
There you go, bro.
Yeah. All right.
All right, yo. Before we get out of here, before we wrap this up, I gotta ask your thoughts on this. Give me what you think they're going to do. Do you think they're going to bring in a Cam Fleming? Do you think they're going to go bring in a Dalton Risner? Do you think they're going to bring in someone to actually compete? Because they said they're going to bring in guys to compete, and all they're bringing in are UDFAs and 6th and 7th round draft picks, bro. What are your thoughts here? Because I keep going back to it, Dante, after that night 1 of the draft, and I know how intense you were into the draft, so I'm sure this didn't slip by you. When you saw them say you guys are more worried about the offensive line than we are, Dante, did that come off to you like guys who are relying on Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg to take him to the? It sounded like guys who got a plan, not who are relying on those two guys, huh?
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I took it. I think the only thing that was weird about that comment is that like they haven't done anything on the offensive line. You know what I mean? Like if you make that comment and like, even if they had signed a player that I objectively thought was bad, right? Like say they went out and they signed like a right tackle that I just didn't think was very good. But even at that point, then it's like, okay, well, they think they've solved that problem. So it makes sense that they would say, we're not worried about it. And so when I hear Chris Grier say that, I agree with you. Like, it's kind of like, all right, like they're probably going to add somebody because like, oh, the offensive line, like we don't think the offensive line is a problem. And it's like, okay, well, either you're blind or you're lying to me, right? Like it's really hard for me to believe that like they just simply are not going to do anything about it, right? Because that just doesn't make any sense. Now, on the flip side of that, there is a version of this where they're truthful about that and they feel comfortable where they're at, no matter the evidence that has been provided to them. And that's why I kind of brought up that first point of like it was a weird comment to me, because they haven't done anything at all to address the offensive line. They swapped Dieter for Dan Feeney, right? Like that's like literally the only offensive line move that they made. Like literally, like I'm not even like forgetting about a random guard that they signed. Like it's literally they signed Dan Feeney. That's it. Yeah. And we just mentioned a couple UDFAs, right?
But we mentioned Matthew Bergeron. I think they were waiting to see what happened at 51.
Maybe.
And they were telling Shell and Fleming, yo, sit on your hands. We want to see how the draft plays out first. Because that was one of the first names I heard they were in love with privately was Matthew Bergeron. One of the first names I heard.
It would have made a lot of sense, but at the same time, like it was a really weird comment. It just really was. It was just very odd because they haven't done anything to address the offensive line. So, if you're taking them at face value, which maybe you shouldn't, but if you are, right, like Chris Grier basically just said that he sat down, watched Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg last year and said to himself, I don't need to do anything about this. right, at face value. And so that's what's so weird about it to me. If they, because people are like, oh, it's a smoke screen. Who the hell are you smoke screening on April 28th or whatever the draft was? Who are you smoke screening? Who?
Yeah.
Why? What are you smoke screening? You're really setting up a smoke screen for Cam Fleming? Give me a break. You know what I mean? Like that's So if they're truly doing that, like that's why it's so weird to me, is I don't understand the process there, right? Like the answer to that question should have been like, well, we like the guys that we have now, but we're always looking for ways to improve the team, blah, 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 right? Like that's the generic answer. And honestly, I appreciate Chris Grier's candor as an analyst. It makes my job a lot easier. But I don't know. I hope they do something, but at the same time, like I don't want Dolphins fans to get the idea that like suddenly Cam Fleming and Brandon Shell are like
the answer
because like they're not.
They're patchwork. They're short-term fixes. That's all they are.
Yeah, and like it would not surprise me if those guys get signed and they think Austin Jackson wins that camp battle. You know what I mean? Like it really wouldn't surprise me. I don't really think that much more highly of a guy like Brandon Shell and Cam Fleming.
I'm hoping is Cam Fleming gets signed or Brandon Shell, they win that spot. Austin Jackson gets relegated to the guard battle with Eichenberg. Best man wins.
Yeah. It's tough, man. It's not gonna be
not fun.
No, it's not. I mean, they are. I talked about this pretty in depth on the Dolphins talk show last night. Like they are one injury, man. From
their depth isn't even good. That's what's not even. You don't even have good depth. Like that's what's a disaster here is you don't even have the depth, man.
Yeah.
And I told people this, and I'll tell you this: get to scouting that offensive tackle class because that's where it looks like they're going next year in that first round.
We've been saying that for
here it comes
4 years, man.
Joe Alter, Fashanu, here we go. Bro, final thoughts and where people can find you, brother.
Yeah, final thoughts on the Dolphins draft. I think they did a solid job. I think I gave it like a B or B+ or something, along those lines. I think they did a solid job given that they had 4 picks and none in the top 50. I think they got a starter in Cam Smith, and I think they got a future starter in Devon Achane. So you know what? That's fine with me. Call it a day. You took through dart throws in the 6th and 7th round. So I'm happy. I'm happy with the Dolphins did. I wasn't expecting much with 4 picks. I mean, how can you?
Yeah.
Where you can find my work, All Nation Dolphins. I've been doing a lot of NFL draft stuff. If you want to read my full written thoughts on any of these prospects, they're all up. The Ryan Hayes one will be up probably tomorrow or the next day. I just finished his film and that right up tonight. So hopefully soon. And then I would encourage everyone to go to the 33team.com. Check us out there. Click around the site. We got a ton of really, really great stuff from former NFL players, executives, all of the insight that I just gave about how NFL teams process works is all public information. You can all go and read about Rick Spielman. You can read scouting reports from this year's class done by, former NFL scouts, and they're awesome. You can disagree with their opinions all day long. God knows I do. But they have a really in-depth process. They do the work, and that's all you could possibly ask for. So I'd highly recommend heading over to 33team.com. I know Dolphins fans not particularly happy with some power rankings that we released recently, but we do a lot of good work and just like the process stuff. So if you watch Reason, he's a guy who's big into that stuff. We have a ton of that stuff on there, so highly recommend it.
All right, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back tomorrow night with the Cam Smith profile. Always a pleasure, Dante. I'm sure we'll have you on when we do that panel if time permits this season. Guys, I'll see you tomorrow night. Until next time, fins up, everyone.